cooling down.
That's a series.
Cool the jets, some sweating bullets. Gotta turn the fan on and get the air circulating. Welcome back to Waking Mad, by the way.
Welcome back. This is part 2 of the series.
Part 2 of this episode in the series. Sometimes you forget to introduce yourself. You're so busy having an idea.
Yeah, well, we're talking about how ideas are very, very powerful. I mean, and the word. You know, I mean, when you look at boundaries in countries, they're not physical things.
Yeah.
They're just an idea. Yet if you cross that boundary, like between America and Mexico, you get shot. Like, that's just an idea upheld by the people and the police enforcing them. The policies, you know, they get homosexuals thrown into jail, and you know, like, cultures, like all of these things are just ideas, little things in the back of your mind that go, ding, let's do this. And only through mindfulness can we be liberated, can we truly drive this mental-based vehicle through the chaos, you know, the slander and the lies and the darkness.
Well, I think mindfulness is that very important capacity, and it's the only way to achieve true dialogue. In part 1 of this episode, we're talking about what dialogue really is, and you know, it's just another synonym for philosophical engagement, dialectics with the thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, and it's something magical, really. Almost the effect that happens between 2 or more people when having a discussion. You can have a dialogue between communities and nations. You can have a dialogue where many, many voices are being heard. Maybe it's called a multi-log, I don't know. But the point is it emerges in the space between us, much like we were talking before about Monet's Impressionism, or the pastiche of postmodernism, and all these other beautifully jargon-esque terms which indicate something special in the space between. In Impressionism, it's the space between the artist and the object, or the perceiver and what is being perceived. And of course, this is a magical space of creation, and psychocentrism, biocentrism is all about how observation creates the nature of reality. The act of observation is inherently required for the universe to exist, and this is often the missing link, if you will, in cosmology, in understanding the theory, the unified field theory of the existence of the universe, which has eluded physicists for decades and decades. But those who I think are in the know, and I'm not the font of all knowledge here, but it seems evident to me that without consciousness, you don't really have a universe. And that's why they can't get a unified field theory. You just get all these strange theories and counter theories that don't really make sense. And, so with dialogue, the space between is where creation emerges, because you're conscious entities, conscious units, engaging in this discussion. It's not coming from me, though. It's coming through me. And that's why I think in the beginning there was the word.
In other words,
dialogue means with the word, it's coming through me. When we often, just to finish this point, begin to talk, I've noticed this with you in our dialogue, in our philosophical dialogue, we often don't really know what we're going to talk about, and it's only through accepting that and being courageous and letting go of the need to control and be perfect and all that.
Or to be an expert.
Yeah, or worrying about how you're going to be perceived, or whether I'm going to pull this off when you're talking about complex ideas, or whether my brain's going to work properly, my mind's going to work properly, whether we're going to be speaking over each other, or are we going to be having a flowing conversation, etc., etc., etc. Are we going to run out of room on the SD chip? All these sorts of things. You've got to let go of it all and just do it. And seriously, don't just take my word for it. Try it out. When you say you can't do something, just give it a go. Just give it a trial. You'll often be pleasantly surprised. And I think we all need to be, I think it would help immeasurably in our current predicament of resurgent fanaticism, of political and religious dogma, which I would suggest is the greatest enemy to humankind as we speak. It's political and religious dogma. No, let's engage in dialogue, let's engage in philosophical engagement. A part of that may be scientific empiricism, and let's question things, and then we can be set free via the truth. But show up for the conversation, let it happen. A dialogue occurs within oneself, yourself and between us.
Yep.
And that's based on mindfulness of what might be blocking the dialogue within me and between us, such as the egotistical attachment to an idea and needing to be right. Only through sacrificing the need to be right can righteous conversation occur, really.
Yeah.
Now, Jesse, you've got a method of using your computer to dialogue.
Well, you use a computer, or you could write, but basically, you write in a journal. But basically, it's really interesting. It's a bit quirky, but when you sit down and
like a word processor,
a word processor, or your journal with your pen, and you just say hi, and then you try to be present, as in what you're doing. And that means that you make your mind a bit clear and you're kind of mindful of what you're doing. And then the first thing that comes back into your mind, you write it down. And so you end up, what I often end up, often end up with a dialogue with myself. I would say hi, and he would say hello. And we talk about probably a number of concepts. And they're usually they're quite relative to the things that I need to be doing or things that I'm thinking about.
Need to be doing.
Yeah, and so it's an interesting exercise.
You're creating a space.
Yeah.
For that dialogue to emerge.
Yeah.
The question is who is talking?
Yes. Who am I talking to?
Or indeed what?
Yes. Exactly.
Is talking.
But
that's the question.
It feels like, and it seems like, just by reading back on what I've written, that there is aspects of me coming through and helping me to facilitate dialogue with. So it's an interesting exercise.
Well, journaling and automatic writing, as it's been termed by, I think, sort of spiritualists, it's when you put pen to paper and you let it flow through you. And they say that's a method of spirit communication. Spirits can not only come through a clairvoyant medium and speak using his or her voice box, but they can use the pen. And it's quite an interesting exercise to let go of control and then let a flowing occur between you. But perhaps we're not going quite as far as that.
Not as far as that.
We're talking about aspects of self. Now, let's talk a bit about aspects of self, because when you're having a dialogue within yourself, I actually do think you're tapping into aspects of self. Mm-hmm. If what is the self? What are you? Or who are you?
Yes.
What am I? What are you? Now, a way to drive you mad or drive someone mad is to continually say to them, who are you? And they answer with something that's always inadequate and, bereft of meaning. And you just say, who are you? They answer again, and you just say, who are you? It can drive people mad. Or it can drive them to a point of transcendental self-awareness, I would gather. So what is the self? Parts of self exist, it seems. You would acknowledge, I'm sure, that you have roles. You have roles of self.
Yes.
You have the parent, you have the child, you have the adult, you have the professional, you have the lad at the football game, you have the chap who goes to church and is extraordinarily well behaved, and then you have the lover, the Aphrodite energy. Mm-hmm. You have the warrior, and this herein we start to move toward what was probably best. One of the best descriptions of this is Jungian psychology. Carl Gustav Jung was a contemporary of Freud. He was actually one of Freud's mentees, and then went on as a point of departure, there's that term again, to take it synthetically to bigger and badder and greener pastures. And Jung really brought together a whole sort of psychology of understanding the nature of human existence, particularly transcendental humanism, which is that we seem to be cross-culturally very similar. We have aspects and features of our unconscious mind which show up in our dream symbology and show up in various themes in our lives, such as the knight in shining armor and the maiden who needs to be saved, and the old wise teacher and the hero's journey, the quest, and the wounded healer, and all these sorts of things. Wounded healer being an archetype, which is what they call it. It's very, very salient within myself. Sometimes you have to be totally fucked up in order to help others, because only then can you understand.
Yes.
On your own healing journey.
Yeah.
Again, it's not what is, but what you do with it that counts.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if you've been messed up, what are you going to do with it?
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to heal? And then can you use that wisdom, that philosophy, in order to heal others?
Personal experience.
How could you not help others if you know how to?
Yeah. If you've been through that pain yourself, how could you not have the empathy to help others? And
so, archetypes are really the whole point of this, because it's quite complex for many people to get this, but it's in a nutshell. It's the idea that you don't have a location of self.
Mm-hmm.
You're kind of like here at this point.
That's why you can't define it.
That's right. And it's self-evident. And you're basically, your unconscious mind is not local. It's too vast. You sort of have some people think you have a discrete version of the unconscious mind, which is a privacy, but then it's connected in some way, shape or form by acts of degrees or whatever, or otherwise, where this unconscious mind of oneself discreetly becomes enjoined into like a network, and they call this the collective unconscious. And in this collective unconscious, which is a bit like a matrix or a cyberspace, you have programs which are pre-existing in this space that we're basically downloading all the time. You have aspects of self archetypes which are overarching versions of this particular manifestation now. It goes back a little bit to Plato's world of form, where the idea of a transcendental ultimate world, if you will, was the real perfect version of any feature, and then there are imperfect emanations or imperfect copies on this level, the physical world. So, Jesse and Ben and this book and this chair and table or whatever, imperfect copies of an original divine, really, source idea called form. And Platonism and Neoplatonism is really quite connected to Christianity in that regard, and there are some probably conspiratorial theories, but who knows, that Plato actually wrote many books of the New Testament, the Bible. The idea that the same principle applies of this ultimate heavenly paradise, if you will, which is perfect, and this is like an imperfect copy, and so on and so forth. But that's probably another chapter. So if you have awareness of these archetypes within yourself, and you let go of location such that the sense of self can be expanded, you can have a conversation, most definitely a dialogue between these different archetypal parts of self, which I think Jesse might be doing when he's doing his journaling. I definitely do it in my journaling.
Yes.
Parts of self come through.
Yes.
I don't necessarily use the same method you use, where you're like, hi, hello, and so on, which is a really good idea, and it'll be a good experiment to conduct, I think. But I'll just start free-flowing my writing, and then different aspects of self will basically take over the use of the pen, so to speak. And I'll kind of see a clear narrative, but I'll see different inflections of voice tone, if you will, coming through, which indicate different aspects. There are some aspects of self, speaking personally, which I'm not all that comfortable with, and I think that many people probably feel the same, like the aggressive parts of self and those sorts of things. This sort of narrow-minded, demonic, inflexible, hateful, grasping, hedonistic, narcissistic aspects of self. And I think we all need to keep these parts in check. But I think at the same time, it would be unwise and folly to repress them completely, which is suppression beyond the point of conscious awareness that you've done that. Because I think that's how they become roguish. Parts of self become roguish, a bit like a CIA agent working for the KGB or
treachery and
unsupervised staff can get up to mischief. Unsupervised children can get up to mischief. You kind of need that adult supervision recommended, parental guidance recommended. So I think you're best to keep these parts of you, even the parts you're uncomfortable with or don't like, or indeed loathe, you're best off leaving that judgment a little bit by the by and integrating these parts of self, because they are transformed in so doing. And this is where we see a healing journey using archetypal Jungian psychology and moving forward, where we look at integration. We look at integration of parts of self which are roguish and discrepant and doing a lot of harm, like a loose cannon on a deck of a timber ship.
So I think for a lot of people, they might not be able to relate to having to realizing or understanding that self is made up of parts. So personalities or characteristics are parts of self. Now, I think most people might say that, well, these parts of myself are me, as in you take ownership of these parts. You think that they identify you.
Yeah.
And therefore, you can't differentiate between parts and self. It's a bit like saying a car is just a car, rather than acknowledging that it's made up of the engine and it's made up of clutch and brakes and fuel injector systems and whatnot, But the nature of the vehicle is that it's made of parts. And so you can only understand this when you use mindfulness, where you develop a peace of mind to observe self, inside self, emotional self, or the thoughts that come up.
And it's often a non-judgmental observation.
Non-judgmental, yes.
Yeah.
And then you start becoming aware that these things are not coming from me. A very simple exercise of this is fasting. If you you take off food and you just drink water for days, you will notice these urges and these thoughts that, like, you want to fast. So that is your purpose, that is your intention. But despite that, you have aspects within self that fight that challenge you, that for some reason, like some cases, you will find yourself, you pick up a banana and you're eating a banana and you go, wait, I'm fasting, And this happens everywhere in social interactions.
This unconscious
automaton
aspect of what have I just done?
Yeah.
Why did I say that? Or this whole, I've said it to myself before, I've shoved a fist in my mouth. Shut your mouth, Ben. Don't say another word, right? And it's like this part of me is almost like monstrously, roguishly compulsive. It just needs to do something. And I'm fairly well functional. I look at some people, some poor souls who will have impulse control disorders, or they relapse into addictions, or they become violent, and they're like, what have I done? These parts can sort of take over.
Yeah.
So they become quite, obvious or emergent when you fast, is that what you're saying?
And this is much like having a skilled painter, a skilled writer. Find any skilled artisan, and they are able to understand the complexities, the parts, the finesse, the different variations of what's involved in that, which to a novice, they wouldn't be able to understand that. So in order to get to that stage, you have to exercise a discipline to learn the skill.
It's discipline, all right?
Yes. It's not easy.
In this way, it's awful to say, but you can say a lot of people have mental health problems or mood problems or anger problems or addiction, compulsion problems, not just because of what's caused it, but because of the way it's managed or mismanaged at an ongoing level, where there's a lack of discipline.
Yeah.
There's a lack of discipline around, the way you behave. I couldn't help myself, Dialogue, which is that, that conversation, if you will, between parts of self, so a dialogue with yourself, is happening all the time in actual fact, and we're actually choosing what we're allowing to come through at all times. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it can be very, very difficult, or you can have a lapse of mindfulness and a mindlessness comes through.
Yeah.
For many people, mindlessness is pretty much the case 24/7. I used to ride motorcycles. I don't ride them anymore. Well, not at the moment. I might get back into it one day. But I remember seeing like motorists coming towards you, and they've got this like 10-mile gaze, and they're basically asleep with their eyes open. They can't even see you, And all kinds of terrible things happen because people are asleep at the wheel, so to speak, in life. Mindfulness is the antidote to mindlessness.
Yeah.
Where you do pay attention and you are disciplined, and if you stuff up, review it. Where did I go wrong? How did I lose my mindfulness? Did I get drunk? Did I get besieged and overwhelmed by an opinion or an emotion? Where did that come from?
Yeah.
There's this thing in psychology called an abreaction, where you overreact to something. It's like, you freaked out for no reason really. because you were triggered and an unresolved issue came up in that moment. It wasn't just about that issue, it was about what was actually unresolved and probably repressed within you.
And so you treat it like you would like write a book or
a self-analysis.
Iterations. You write something and then you edit it, and then once you've edited it, you look back and you're like, it could be changed differently. And only by doing it, only by having content there to work with, can you impose an observation and the way to change it. Otherwise, what's there to change? So this is where the bad things that happen, or bad things in yourself, or bad habits, are actually good things, because they teach you when you are observant, when you execute.
Again, it's what you do with it that counts. It's how you manage it.
And I really love what you said a while back. You said that it's very healthy to have a relationship with ideas, to think that we have a relationship with ideas, as opposed to ideas are us. We become ideas, or you become your ideas.
You identify with it.
Yeah, you identify with it.
Which is unwise.
Very. But if we have the attitude that we have a relationship, much like you would with a partner or your family.
Better based on respect.
Yes, because you realize that they're also powerful and they're helpful, and they can also lead you into trouble.
A deluge in a paper cup.
So mindfulness is a concept that I think came from the Buddhists.
Yes, we probably should get onto that.
Yes. And
how can mindfulness be used as a method to maintain dialogue within yourself and between each other?
Yeah.
It needs to be based on respect. It needs to be based on conscious awareness and discipline. Mindfulness is a wonderful method to achieve it.
Yeah. And mindfulness is this kind of new hype term method coming about in these spiritual networks.
Well, psychology, really. I mean,
it's psychology as well.
It's sort of what they call a third wave cognitive therapy application. The term mindfulness, it is becoming, or has been really for probably the past 15 years, the in thing.
Yeah.
The fad.
So how would you define mindfulness? Because I actually have an issue with the way that it's...
Yeah. Mindfulness is basically conscious awareness, okay? But it means more than that, because it's a method that you can use for all kinds of psychosocial problems. People with anger problems and moodiness and emotional issues and impulse control issues and borderline personality disorder, where you kind of are running on adrenaline and it's like living without any emotional skin. You're very raw, very reactive, fly off the handle, all kinds of impulsiveness. It's called, amongst other things, a borderline personality disorder. So mindfulness was a part of what they call dialectic behavior therapy. Talking about Hegelian dialectics, the thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, and the dialogue being through the word, you can see how this is all kind of coalescing. Dialectic behavior therapy is the idea of a conversation or a dialogue with yourself and an evolution therein. So mindfulness is the ability to pay attention to what's going on now. And when it's based on meditation, I would call it meditation in everyday living. Meditation, let's go back to that then. What is meditation? Meditation is focusing on one thing for an extended period of time. You can focus on, like we were saying before, the word Om, or some other kind of
a flame,
phrase,
mantra,
affirmation, a mantra. You can focus on something like a candle flame. You can just look at a candle flame.
A feeling.
You can focus on a feeling. You can focus on a principle like love or a concept. You can focus on an environmental object like a tree, or one of the things I love to do is focus on the entire environment around me as well. Focusing on your breathing is a good way to start the whole gig. So it's a dynamic process breathing. So you're breathing in, you're breathing out, you're holding between. So you can also slow your breathing down, which has physiological benefits of relaxation. Well, it's illustrated there, such that you can actually calm down and prevent panic attacks through flexing your diaphragm. So breathing into the abdomen, so expand the abdomen, then expand the chest. Hold. And you breathe in for 5, hold for 5, Then exhale for 5 from the abdomen, squeezing through the mouth. And then pause again for 5. And so on and so forth. So I call this the 5 box, or the box 5 breathing. So in for 5, hold for 5, out for 5, hold for 5. And that's only 3 breaths a minute, which is very slow, relaxed breathing. Obviously, we breathe a lot when we're agitated. Hyperventilation is the chief cause of panic attacks. So, you're going to prevent all that as well. It has health benefits. And obviously, a calm mind is the best mind for which to use for dealing with many problems in life, as opposed to an agitated mind or whatever.
Most problems, yeah.
Most problems. Don't get me wrong. People often think stress is bad. Stress is not bad.
Not bad.
A certain amount of stress is required to motivate you and get your brain going, because cortisol and adrenaline gets you going. Like having a cup of coffee. Why would you have a stimulant? It's bad. No, it's not bad. Yeah. It just comes down to dosage and how much stress you're actually undergoing.
And use as well.
Yeah.
How you use it. How you have a relationship with it.
Yeah. And how you manage it. And so mindlessness is the opposite of mindfulness, and it's when you basically lose control and you forget what you're doing and you're no longer aware. Probably a bit related to ADHD, really, where you have an attention deficiency disorder. So anyway, meditation is focusing on one thing for an extended period of time. It can be a dynamic movement of things as well. When you get distracted, the goal is to notice that you've been distracted into fantasy or imagination, and then remind yourself to come back to your meditation object and to continue focusing on the breathing, or focusing on the mantra, which is the phrase, or a yantra, which is a symbol, a yantra, or a concept or whatever. And usually it's just good to sit to do that for like 10 minutes, 20 minutes. You might also do walking meditation. You might walk in the forest or by the beach or even in the city street and focus on each footstep, the feeling, the sensations of the footsteps, the feeling, the sensations of breathing. Also, the feelings and sensations of the motor vehicle that you're driving, being very present, the feelings and sensations of being with someone and talking with them, noticing. But this is where you start to move toward mindfulness, because you can apply meditation to everyday living.
Yes.
I walk into a room and I feel the room. I'm picking up a subtle tension. I'm starting to become aware of the energy I'm putting out. And I might be mindfully nipping that in the bud, or changing that, or just being aware of it actually often automatically changes it. You have an auto-correct feature there when you become aware. Again, the light of mindfulness, the light of meditation, the light of consciousness. No shadow can exist in light. And so whatever you do, chopping up vegetables for dinner, or playing with your kids, or walking the dog, or pruning the hedge, it doesn't matter. Anything you do, you pay attention to. When you get distracted, you come back. Yeah. And you be in the now. You'll put time aside, of course, for forward planning and contemplation or reflection on the past future. But you don't live there. You don't dwell there, because staying in the future is anxiety-provoking. Staying in the past is often depressing, because there's no energy now. And you need to be here now, because it's the only moment that exists. And really, reality isn't ever flowing, constant, eternal now, being in the now. So there's a lot of wonderful positive health effects and life effects that come from mindfulness. And you can notice things as they're happening, and pretty soon when you get good at mindfulness, you notice things before they happen. You're about to lose your shit and say something, or yell, or make a mistake, or injure yourself, or do something that was hurtful, or just unnecessary. Like, I'll often watch myself about to say something or do something. Don't get me wrong, I'm not perfect at it. I'll mess up all the time. Again, it's a practice. It's a practice that you try to get better at, but you're never perhaps perfect at. And I'll notice myself about to say something, and I'll suspend that. Or I'm about to do something, and I'll actually consider not doing it, and I'll stop that. So mindfulness gives you flexibility and options and room. Mindlessness is autopilot. Yes. You're not present. You're all over the place. You're living in your head, which is where most mental illness comes from. Living in your head. This body is an instrument. Dialogue is a method. Mindfulness is a way, a method, through which to live here consciously. And it gives you relief and respite from the madness that's in your head sometimes, with all the fears that we can project, and the anticipations that we have, and the ruminations of dwelling and going over and over.
Judgments, expectations, assumptions.
And just frantic busyness. A lot of people talk to me about, as a psychologist, they talk to me about, how they just can't shut their mind up. So meditation and mindfulness is a way where we just don't pay attention to the mental arguments or whatever, and focus on something else. But that means you're taking your energy away from that. and it can't exist without your energy. So by ignoring it, basically, not suppressing it, but by taking your mind off it and focusing on, say, your breathing, it basically goes away.
And it's a bit like if you ever want to get work done, if you're at a workplace and you go to do your work, let's say you've got an office job or you're a mechanical worker, if your place is a mess and if your tools are everywhere, you can't. It's very difficult to get work done.
You're always looking for things. You can't find things. You're stumbling and tripping over things.
But it's unsafe. But if you do mindfulness, you simplify the workspace. You clean it up, and you can see everything. You know where everything is, and so it's just a better environment with which to conduct yourself in. Yeah. And so that's meditation. Meditation does that. And mindfulness is a way for you to observe, to see the variables at play. It's a bit like playing a game of chess, if you ever played one. It allows you to see what's happening on the board, what the player is doing, how you can conduct yourself, and whether or not, or how you want to go about it.
So you're sort of saying, by what I'm hearing, is that your understanding of mindfulness is more about an overarching awareness of the whole situation.
Yes.
Rather than getting stuck into the parts.
I have a problem with
like an overview.
Yeah, I have a problem with contemporary definition of mindfulness. Mindfulness, they usually say that mindfulness is about being present, but I think that mindfulness, if we take this word literally, it's mindful. It's about what's filling your mind, and we're talking about the different personalities, aspects of self, the personality matrix, and if you're aware of what is running, what programs are running, what archetypes or what characters are running in your current state, you can observe them, observe the variables, whereby you are then placed in a strategic position to manipulate them, to control them, according to your will and your desire. And so only by being in that place are you able to observe the unhealthy ones and the healthy ones that you want to keep, or the ones that you're trying to procure, to create, to work towards. So mindfulness, it's a bit like if you ever run a computer and your computer's running slow, and you bring it to a technician who's found, you've got all this malware and all these programs running in the background.
It's an overarching view of the functioning of the computer. He's looking at the whole process of the system, whereas you're looking at it's slow to download something, or I can't upload this, or I can't get this working. He's looking at the whole system, isn't it?
The whole system, and that's what mindfulness.
That's fine. I would actually look at this as a dialogue, and an inclusive dialogue, bringing to bear the points we were making earlier about dialogue, and the way that mindfulness is required for a good dialogue. Now, that's what we're saying. It's also the other way around. I would say that we're having a dialogue about dialogue. And I'm mindful about how mindfulness is required to do so. That's a bit of a second order tier cognition thing going on there, metacognition. but basically, I would say that bring it all together, integrate it. I would say the overarching view of what's really going on here at a high level. I would also look at what's going on right now, being in the moment. I would also look at applying meditative focusing capacity to whatever it is you're doing.
Yes.
So if I'm drinking some water, then simply drink the water. Put the glass to your lips, mindfully pay attention.
Feel. Temperature. Texture.
And the water goes down your throat, and you feel that movement, and the glass is in my hand, and at the same time I'm in this body, and I'm speaking to you, and this man is sitting next to me, and it's all happening. So, or I could be thinking about something I'm going to do tomorrow, or I could be thinking about something, lamenting or reflecting on something in the past, worrying about something, ruminating, which is going over and over the same old thing. I could be doing all this stuff in my head and not really present. Sorry, did you just say something? That kind of thing happens a lot. And it's not a good way to live. It's really the cornerstone of anxiety disorders and depression. And you really can't get much out of life when you're not presently living it. You might as well not be here. You're in your head.
It's a bit like trying to drive a car, and just imagine every 5 minutes you you stop by the side of the road because something was pretty or distracting.
You didn't get there, would you?
You can't get to where you want to go. So if you want to drive effectively, and there's pros and cons to both.
You can pay attention to the journey.
Yep.
And the destination mindfully, simultaneously. Otherwise, you'd never get there. However, if you didn't pay attention to the journey, well, you wouldn't be living now. So it's that whole
it's
paradox.
Paradox. It's the embracing of both. Yeah.
So does that explain mindfulness to you? I mean, you probably read all kinds of sources of this before and have your own opinions on the matter. Then I think that this is a pretty good rendering. It's about applied meditation to everyday living. It's paying attention. It's focusing. When you get distracted, remind yourself by coming back to the point at hand. And oftentimes, when you're very distractible, what actually is going on is you've got some unresolved issues you need to sort out, some problems that need to be contemplated. You might need to cathartically counsel. In other words, express yourself and get it out. It might be the case that you have various kinds of drives coming up within you that need to be satiated, like hunger or thirst or sexual release, something like that. Or sometimes, and so that's invading your consciousness all the time, and you know the way you act on it is more important than whether you act on it, and how you act on things is important. It might be the case that you need rest. You need to take a break.
Yes,
because you're distractible.
Or there's a conflict of priorities. So often I find like I'm a father, and I've also got at-home business. And so sometimes those priorities conflict, and that frustrate me.
So balancing all the needs.
Often it's about putting one down
and exercise.
Yeah, very mindful. Yeah.
Yeah. So just think of the word mindful. Your mind is full with whatever it is that you are doing, from both the hands-on here and now and big picture gestalt overarching view, a view from the top and a view from the ground. In some kind of wonderfully beautiful tacit paradox.
Yeah.
And when you get distracted, you simply don't, self-flagellate like a Benedictine monk of yesteryear, but become aware that you've become distracted and come back to what you're doing. And if you need to take a break and rest. And you can see stuff coming up and you can be more selective. And also, with regards, as I was saying before, archetypes, you can sort of be aware of parts of yourself that are coming up, but not necessarily choose to embody them or act upon them.
Yeah.
That's an integrationist capacity, because other aspects of self will be affecting and informing these other aspects of self, which might be a bit more roguish and problematic.
Your body, or particularly your mental self or your personality matrix, is much like, when you adopt mindfulness and meditation, it's much like being in a position of a painter or a writer. Here you have before you a blank canvas. And this blank canvas represents you. And here you are, the painter, with all the materials, the ideas and the tools that we have to work with, from consciousness and the subconsciousness and whatnot. And we paint. And if we are mindful, we can paint beautiful pieces of art. If we are not mindful, well, chances are probably very low that you would come out beautiful. Often than not, they just run-of-the-mill kind of paint gets muddy and everywhere. So it's really about execution and mastery and artistry of self, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a journey. It's a process. It's a passion. It's a mindfulness task. It's a commitment. It's a purpose. Not that we can necessarily achieve perfection. Perfecting yourself through discipline and through awareness, through self-awareness. I've often said, self-awareness is the key to genuine empowerment, genuine power. Mindfulness is the way that we achieve self-awareness, and the different aspects of self that I'm either comfortable or not comfortable with. I can start making choices accordingly.
Yes.
And then we let go of this idea that we know the self. The self is more of an abstract community of discrepant and accordant parts that are existing in some kind of matrix, some kind of maelstrom. And this consciousness is coming through this sort of embodied, often compartmentalized rendering of parts. And the consciousness sort of illuminates and brings into existence these parts, which you could say are archetypally causal, or like back to Plato's form, existing in form. And really, when you start to think about yourself on this level, I mean, just forget even, putting yourself into some kind of a basket or a bracket or that you know yourself completely.
Yeah.
Once you say you know something and you stop asking questions, you'll never understand it.
Yes.
All of a sudden, yourself becomes the universe.
Yeah.
And that's the point.
Yes.
Through this dialogue, this mindful dialogue, we come to the point where self and the universe, subject and object, are kind of one.
Yeah.
Each requiring the other.
Paradoxically.
Yeah,
each requiring the other, exactly. The yin and the yang.
This is why you can get profound states of consciousness, and often what is experienced in meditation, oftentimes when you've experienced meditation for an extended period of time, it's been called samadhi, or otherwise just peak experiences. You get this sense of your limited version of self dropping away, and you get this sense of atonement or at-one-ment. You become
expansion,
one with all things, and it's often met with joy and love. Joy and love are the chief aspects of that experience. You could say that some people who resist that process, like in a near-death experience, for example, or maybe a psychedelic trip of some sort, ayahuasca, LSD, psilocybin, not talking about toxicology or bad trips or whatever, but you might, or near-death experiences involving the dark side or whatever. But I think if you have resistance to the experience, and because consciousness is so powerful, as soon as you start to interpret it in a negative way, which is again why dogma and political and religious dogma is so bloody dangerous. As soon as you start to be biased in terms of your interpretation of that experience, you affect the experience.
Yes.
Back to the double slit experiment again.
Yes.
The observer effect. You are affecting what is being observed by the act of observation. So be bloody careful with, interpreted bias. Much better to just be aware and watch the interplay and reserve opinion, and then you get like a more pure engagement with between subject and object.
Yes. Yeah.
There's less obstacle or obstruction in the way, and I think you can be reborn in such a way. At an ever-occurring present moment, you're being reborn. Mindlessness is based on categories and categorization of new experiences, so it's always old. It's always fitting it into preconceived notions, and that's judgment. And depression is based on this. Anxiety. I go outside and I expect everyone to want to kill me, so I'm living in fear. I mean, I'm putting it all into categories. Pre-existing stereotypes. Prejudice is the same. Pre-existing categories. Projections. I'm changing what I'm seeing by the act of projection. Conversely, observe the fact that you're doing that. Observe the fact that you're interpreting it with a bias.
Out bias.
And that's a mindfulness experience.
Yes.
And by doing that, you will see how absurd it is to be biased because you don't know for sure. And then you kind of release your hold on the experience, and it can be rather pleasantly surprising.
But that takes courage. You have to have courage to be comfortable with the unknown, because the unknown is big and the expanse is huge, and you have to embody that. In cognitive therapy, which is a wonderful way to marry mindfulness and philosophy and self-help or psychotherapy, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, as well as mindfulness-based stress reduction, you want to question all preconceived notions and assumptions, because many of the time they are involved in your interpretive bias, which is affecting the way you experience things such that you feel bad in whatever way you feel, anxious, depressed, suicidal, psychopathic, whatever. Disputing assumptions, living in the question, challenge them. Once again, this glorious thing called the question mark. Once you say you know something and you stop asking questions, blah, 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 you know the rest of it. But the thing is, live in the question and you won't be living in old categories anymore. And you're reborn constantly every moment. So once you go, I know what he's doing. Hang on, do I? In fact, you might do. But what if you don't? Be curious. Look again. What does the word respect mean? It comes from Latin, to re-spectate, to look again, observe, rather than to overlook. I wonder what's going on here. Or I think, I know my garden, that's my garden. You walk through it, pick up the newspaper and walk back to the house. Well, hang on, experience it again, because it's always changing. Everything in the world is always changing. The universe is always changing. The only constant thing is change. Oh, what do you know? The jacaranda is in full blossom. Look at that lilac.
I can't believe the oranges are now ripened, and I can go, all of a sudden you're in this beautiful, ever-emerging present moment and no longer living in this depressogenic categorization.
Or even yet to spot illness or decay and to deal with it then and there.
Yeah. And you can prevent accidents from happening. Yeah. You can see things happening, but you got the benefit of not only mindfulness but foresight and long sight, almost to a point of probably precognition. Really, you can see patterns. Yes. You can see things that look a bit troublesome coming your way. Something wicked this way comes, and take evasive action accordingly.
Because the bias blinds you,
and it's difficult to prove that because you take the evasive action, and whatever problem never occurred. You see? Mm-hmm. And you go, well, how do I know it was going to happen? Well, you don't. You can kind of look back and go, what may have happened. Mm-hmm. But one of the ways that you can actually know that it's working, this foresight via mindfulness, is that your life starts to become smoother generally, or more exciting, or more successful, or
peaceful.
You pick yourself up resiliently from problems, or more peaceful. Whatever really, a lovely combination of all the above probably. And you stop stuffing up as much. Or if you do, you learn from it in a quicker way or a more insightful way. You're not wasting time on things that don't really matter so much to you as much. You're probably maybe consolidating your intentions and energies. And it becomes self-evident that, folly and mistake and error and injury or karma is happening less often. Because I think your life starts to get a bit smoother. I think that's how come it's used for dialectical behaviour therapy. Yeah. That's how you can overcome things like borderline personality disorder and depression and anxiety, because you start to use these skills and you notice your life gets better, and you're able to manage your emotions and your relationships and experiences to a far better capacity.
Just by educating a certain discipline will treat an array of disorders and diseases. So it's used in psychotherapy all around the world. It's used in meditation. The monks have been doing it for centuries. There's a reason why it's being used.
Well, I don't know about you, but I think that's a wrap for now. Mm-hmm. What do you reckon?
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say before we finish? I think it might be time, Jesse, for a beer. A philosophical beer.
Philosophical beer.
A mindful beer.
Does
it mean you have to become an absolute patrician? An absolute, what would you say, hygienic, spiritual zealot or fanatic if you study philosophy, dialogue and practice mindfulness? No. You can live a balanced life, but you can do so mindfully. Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm going to have a philosophical and mindful beer.
So
beer. Apparently in the West here we say beer, and in the East of Australia they say beer. And we know the Americans say beer. I'll just say beer. So how mindful is that when you're mindful of the word itself? Anyway, that's enough ranting and raving. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching Waking Mad. Ben and Jesse will be here hopefully sooner than 3 months or 4 months. Mm-hmm. We'll talk again then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.